Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how even journalists used to covering for the Tories are calling out Sunak's failure to engage after another stage-managed PM Connect event today, which will fool very few voters. Sunak is actively hiding away from awkward questions, including on his support for the Rwanda plan, in a way he won't be able to do come the general election. And this is all part of a campaign that's going to be stretched for him. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Rishi Sunak carried out one of his so-called PM Connect events today, only he doesn't connect. He talks at people and then buggers off. Jason Groves of the Daily Mail, one of the Tory client newspapers, made the point that Rishi Sunak only allowed 4 questions from journalists today. The same Tory client journalist said that Starmer took 17 last week. It's vaguely amusing to think that the Tory media were trying to push the story last week that Starmer was looking to avoid TV debates during the election campaign. Soon put to bed when he said quite clearly that he was looking forward to them with or without Sunak in attendance. The bottom line is that it has been noticed for some time that Sunak severely restricts the questions being asked of him and Starmer does not. It's obvious which one is going to be more comfortable facing scrutiny during the election itself. It's fair to say Starmer is sometimes a bit awkward at these things, just like Sunak himself, especially in interviews. But Starmer's getting lots of practice. And as I said all through last year, Sunak is avoiding that practice. So he's going to be very far from match fit come the election campaign itself when it gets really intense. And his MP should be conscious of that, especially as one of the journalists he avoided today represents a major weakness for him and any future election campaign. Beth Rigby of Sky News made a point of saying that Sunak avoided her question and she's currently interested in asking about his real views on the Rwanda scheme. It's been revealed recently that Sunak as Chancellor opposed the plan. Now, this is almost on the same level as opposing Brexit for the Tories right now. They are fast becoming less a political party with a general ideology and more a cult with strict tenets of faith. It's now becoming more and more difficult for Tory MPs in general and the Tory leadership specifically to distance themselves from the Rwanda plan. This absolute drain on public finances, whose basic principles are contradictory, has become the main plank of Sunak's election strategy. For the last 3 general elections, the Tories basically made Brexit their defining position. Now it's this performative nonsense. A policy designed to be a tussle between the Tories who want to abolish all our human rights and those who want to retain them and think that by taking them away for like 100 people, they can save the other 68 million of us. None of them are prepared to stand up and say, as the Home Secretary said in private, this is batshit. But never mind the merits or otherwise of the policy. The point is that Sunak chose, unwisely in my opinion, to run with it when he should have dropped it like the ticking time bomb it was. He binned the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, no problem with that. He reined in the retained EU law bill. But he simply didn't see the danger in the Rwanda plan. He thought he could use it to keep his swivel-eyed loons on side. But now look where he is. There is little prospect of seeing the policy realised in this Parliament. That means he's cornering himself into having to make it a key part of his election campaign. He'll have no option of just sticking it into some darkened corner of the manifesto and not really mentioning it. A good chunk of his candidates will want it front and centre of their campaigning, and so will much of the Tory media. He will have no choice. A year ago, he could have dropped it. He chose to raise the profile of the policy. Now look at the trajectory he's on. He pointedly avoided taking a question from a journalist on this matter. He can do that now. His so-called public events are always carefully managed. He takes very few questions, something even Tory client media is pointing out. He cannot sensibly control the questions during the election campaign, though. If he turns up to a TV debate or interview, and he really needs to, then he'll have no control over the questions. He won't decide them. The questions are likely to be based on the major issues as the participating parties see them. The bottom line is that immigration and asylum are the top issue for Conservative voters right now. Didn't used to be. That happened on Rishi Sunak's watch. During those debates and interviews, he will inevitably be asked about his attitude to the scheme as Chancellor. He's trying to deny that he said he would scrap the scheme as Chancellor, but as journalists are pointing out, that's not the accusation. He's been accused of wanting the scheme scrapped, not threatening to scrap it, wanting it scrapped. It's like a sort of reverse Michael Howard, did you threaten to overrule him bit. Sunak should be willing to take this question on right now. Like, he made a bit of an attempt in an interview on Sunday. So why not again? If he's got his line sorted, why not again? The fact that he's dodging it means he feels it's a weak area. Now, all political leaders have like weak areas, policies they'd rather not have questions asked about. But a couple of things. First, when they know they're going to be asked anyway, they have to work on a response and deliver it. They can't hide away. They have no choice. Second, this is a weak area that Sunak chose to adopt. Now, although it's getting a bit sticky now, he's had over a year to plan for this moment. If he was going to make this policy a key part of his package, he needed to prepare for it, and he hasn't. He knew what his position about the scheme was as Chancellor. He knew that people would know about it. He knew that people would leak or publish it in time. Think about this from the point of view of, like, take two different voters, one who approves of the Rwanda plan and one who doesn't. Now, the one who doesn't approve is getting the impression that Sunak sees the plan is flawed because it's been reported he had objections to it, if not downright useless, and yet he's pursuing it anyway at great cost. That's not going to give you confidence that he's got the right approach to government. Wasting hundreds of millions on a duff scheme, that is not a vote winner. But then consider it from the point of view of someone who does approve of the plan. These are the voters that Sunak thinks he's chasing. They're also getting the impression that Sunak privately doesn't approve of the plan, and they see that he's failing to implement it. Well, what conclusion do you draw other than he's deliberately sabotaging the plan? He doesn't really believe in it. The plan is failing. Oh, it's failing because he doesn't really believe in it. Again, this is not going to win back those Reform UK voters. He has to nip this in the bud, but he's not doing. He's hiding away. So the discussions will carry on. And this wasn't the only problem revealed today by effectively what Sunak didn't say. At one point, according to LBC, I didn't see that myself, he was invited to offer his thoughts on the candidate selected for Wellingborough, the partner of disgraced former Tory MP Peter Bone. Now, I discussed that selection in the first video today, but Sunak seemed to refuse to discuss her. He said that the party selects its candidates locally, that he was a supporter of local candidates, which is a little bit rich because he's a southerner occupying a constituency in the north of England. So now all the talk is of Rishi Sunak refusing to endorse his own candidate for another really important by-election. And it's Rishi Sunak who will ultimately bear responsibility for the result of that by-election. So that's what Sunak didn't say, which is causing him problems. Because that's what happens. If you don't say a thing, then everyone writes their own views on it. And you're not part of the conversation. Politician needs to be part. If a conversation is going to happen anyway, a politician needs to make sure they've got their point across. But was there anything helpful to the Tories that he did say? Well, there are two widely reported aspects to what he did talk about today, neither of which I would argue is helpful for the election. The first is the usual. Oh, don't let Labour wreck my brilliant plans. Oh, I'm securing your future. Only he described it as Labour will take us back to square one. Now, what's square one? Square one, presumably, is when the Tories took over in 2010. So square one was when we had much lower NHS waiting times and lists. We had a higher standard of living. We had better worker and civil rights. Nobody was threatening our human rights. The country may have been divided on who would be the best government. That's just a disagreement of opinion. But it wasn't engaged in basically one step below civil war. Even prominent Conservative MPs, like Danny Kruger most famously at the moment, are lamenting the fact that the country is now more divided than it was in 2010. Schools and hospitals were being built instead of falling down. The rate of poverty was way lower, with way lower number of food banks being needed. Crime had been cut over that Labour period, and they didn't need to go, oh yeah, we've cut crime if you ignore all this amount of crime, like the Tories are doing at the moment. They didn't have to fiddle the crime figures. Crime was just down, and now it's back up. The national debt had increased as a result of the banking crisis, but is still way lower than it is now, or even as it was in 2019 before COVID. We didn't wonder if we'd meet our own morning dump taking a dip in the local river or coastline. We were insulating homes in order to use less fuel in winter. Whereas now that programme stopped long ago, so people who don't have well-insulated homes are now having to worry about the fact that that fuel is not only needed, but costing more. The list of benefits to going back to square one is just endless. And the second widely reported comment from Sunak was attacking Starmer's Labour for just carping from the sidelines and having no plan of their own. Now, it's been pointed out that this is creating a bit of friction with his own campaign team. CCHQ are busy trying to attack Starmer for his green investment plan. So which is it? Did Labour have a plan or do they not have a plan? Because CCHQ think Labour have a plan and they're just trying to say it's a crap plan. Sunak's trying to say they have no plan. What's the campaign here? What is the campaign? Sunak cannot even agree with his own campaign team. In reality, CCHQ are taking the more strategic line, because wasting a lot of bandwidth claiming Labour have got no plans, that's pointless for the election. Like, first of all, it's not true. I do a video on Labour Social every Sunday on Labour policies. I've done 18 so far. There's still plenty more to cover. But the truth doesn't matter in politics as much as perception. Can voters believe that Labour has no plan? Well, the media do a lot to displace Labour speeches with Tory dead cats, so that helps in terms of whether the public know what Labour's plans are. Okay. But Starmer is going round the country talking to people about them. So then when he does, the local news will cover it because they're desperate for any news. There's only so much sympathy people have for cats stuck up trees. Also, once the election campaign gets underway, Labour will publish their manifesto. I mean, at that point, it'd be impossible to claim Labour have no plans once they basically publish a book of them. So if Sunak keeps on with this line about Labour having no plan, you could argue, well, it might work on some people now, but you're going to have to drop it during the election campaign, aren't you? And then switch to, okay, it turns out they do have plans, but they're all crap. Having a tactic that is going to be rendered useless when the election campaign begins is not really part of a sound strategy. In short, Sunak had a bad first week of 2024. If today is anything to go by, the second week is not turning things around. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.